Although a hot topic, RPA has many challenges. How to scale and apply for best effect. How to measure the real ROI. How to mix and match RPA tools and vendors. And should I replace or augment my people with robots? RPA is often compared with BPM, ERP, or other automation, and that might be valid in some instances, but it feels like we're trying to compare apples and oranges. Effective RPA supplements ERP and BPM and is most likely to work alongside them. I'd like to introduce you to Alessandro, a member of your new digital workforce. Just as with their human counterparts, Alessandro performs best when it's clearly understood what's expected of them and needs monitoring to make sure that time is being spent on the most important tasks. Of course, Alessandro is not alone and is likely to be one of thousands in your organization. Mimicking human resources, Alessandro's contemporaries represent a highly diverse workforce, who for the most part enjoy and prefer working in that traditional silo mentality. When you think of onboarding large numbers of people, you soon realize that scale requires clarity. Clarity on how you integrate with your current workforce, clarity on rules, regulations, policies, procedures, and recruiting at scale highlights how off-the-page knowledge drives the organization. Once we stopped thinking about robots as systems and instead thinking of them as resources, we had a light bulb moment. And in this presentation and the demonstration that follows, we want to share some of those insights with you and the ways in which this shift in thinking is being applied in our products. Just like people, every type of robot has different strengths and weaknesses. So create personas for your robots and share them widely across the organization, just as you would with people. People can then select which of these new personnel are better suited to their particular requirements. So you've identified your ideal robot, you've sent the job offer and they've accepted. Now you need to get ready to have them start work. But what do you need? No desk, company car, or sick pay, but just like people, they do need clear, unambiguous job descriptions and know any other tasks or duties statements in these. Alessandro wants to know exactly what behavior is expected when and will do exactly as asked, regardless of whether they have the correct information to perform that task. Once employed, you need to have a performance evaluation system in place for robots. We're hearing increasing numbers of cases where $100 robots are actually only working 10% of the time and solving $10 problems. Just as with people, you need to assess their value. If it says anything, of course, the robot will provide data to suggest it's doing a good job. So your review system needs to include that 360-degree perspective. Do people feel it's actually aiding them in their work? Does the robot that IT loves actually pay its way financially? And of course, if the robot's not performing, you need to fire it. This may mean replacing with a robot from another vendor, letting people take back the tasks, or possibly even switching to another type of automation. Would you fire a key member of staff before you made sure you could pick up their work? The pace of technology is moving so fast, today's robots are likely to be replaced within 2 years of implementation. Now, process models can save you, but only if they're separate from the vendor providing the RPA. You may want to hire your millennials from a different place to that which you've got your baby boomers. The choice to use people or robots is not binary. The goal should be to act as a workforce multiplier, enabling you to do more and your people to focus on greater value add. But that's not always easy unless you think of both people and robots as resources together. In a bionic situation, robotics enables people to do what they've not been able to do or can no longer do. The focus is on supplementing the human, not replacing them. We should think the same way. Robots are not there to replace our people, but to supplement or enhance their abilities. Strikes may not seem likely, but robots do in fact stop working. Losses in banking have occurred as a result of such stoppages. Humans were not able to take over the tasks, people had been replaced. And nobody had documented the processes, only the robot knew what to do, and it wasn't telling. A different example, Ocado's fully automated warehouses and robotic systems are seen as world-leading, but recently a fire destroyed a distribution center responsible for 10% of their delivery capacity, causing the stock to fall over 14% in 2 days, taking £1 billion off their value. One of the problems was that the robots couldn't smell the smoke. In your business, where do you rely too much on robots? When things go wrong, who do you rely on to smell the smoke? What have you done to address potential issues before they risk becoming a total disaster? Alessandro is going to demonstrate how by thinking of robots like people instead of systems and blending HR thinking with process, we can better identify how to apply and measure the value of RPA, illustrating the use of robots as resources to augment rather than replace people. Bill Gates in Business at the Speed of Thought said, "Computer systems enable us to do the wrong things faster than ever before." Let's make sure that we don't fall into the same trap with our RPA efforts. Thanks, and over to you, Alessandro.
Should we clap? You could. Actually, Mark this morning was joking about leaving his robotic version instead of his human version till today. So, as Mark has been anticipating in his preloaded speech, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to try to give you an example of a different approach to manage RPA at scale. Not only the evaluation part, so not only the part that we have seen already in the presentations during the day before with process mining, but also how to manage when the robots are at work, how to really manage their performance, how to potentially decide to fire them, and how to keep control over them. And we're going to start by what we have seen already yesterday, so by the analysis that process mining is very good at doing. So analysis of performance of the process and to spot which one are the activities and the parts of the process that are more adaptable and more fit for our robotic automation initiative. When it's going to load. I actually have preloaded all the pages in the next screen, so in case it doesn't load, we can go to the next one. Good. Exactly, so like we have seen already, what we can do is that we can take in consideration multiple criteria in order to understand which one are the activities or the parts of the process that are best fit for our RPA initiative. And it can be based on the time consumed, it can be based on the number of manual activities that are executed compared to the number of automated activities. It can be based on department, it can be based on branch, it can be based on multiple different criteria. In this case, we are having a look to a loan application process of a bank. And just by having a quick look to, for example, the cycle times, it becomes easy for us to understand that there are some specific activities that are more time consuming than others. Like, for example, from the concept into the completion of the application, or from the moment in which an email is sent to one of our clients to the moment in which you need to call them to complete all the information that we haven't acquired yet. Or, for example, from the validation of the application to the acceptance. And I could find many more, and I could go in detail on any possible level. I could go into the single process performance, analyze the cycle times, have a check into specific parts of our cycle times, or see how the cycle times deployed on a week-by-week basis. We could go in the details of the workforce segmentation or sub-cycle time to see specific parts of the process, how they have been developing all over the year. And if I'm not happy, I can even go and create my own new widget, so my own new analysis that can go in every possible direction. They can be analyzing my time, they can be analyzing my segmentation of the workforce, they can be analyzing conformance. It can really go in several directions, and I'm not going to spend too much time on that for the demo's sake. Once we have identified the activities that we want to automate, now the job is becoming a bit different. The job becomes to evaluate and assess which strategy on an RPA implementation perspective could be the most effective one, both on a cost perspective, on a time perspective, and on a resource allocation perspective. And to do so, we leverage our traditional process management approach with a hint of simulation. Let me show you how. Loads. So, for example, here you have a classical BPMN model. This is the classical Signavio process modeling platform. Here we have, just to make it clear, here we have already identified some activities where a robot could be potentially applied. Some of them are fully on the robotic swim lanes. Some could have, for example, a gateway for the decision if it's going to be managed by a robot or if it's going to be managed by a human in a specific case. And once I finish identifying all these activities and I signal them, and you see that I have 5, 6 activities, I can move to my simulation environment. When it goes. And in this simulation environment, what I've done is that I prepared two scenarios of how to increase my workforce, either in a direction of robotics or in a direction of more employees. And what we're going to see is what kind of result does this have on a cost, on a process cost perspective, but also on a process execution time perspective. And And in order to do this, as I said, I have defined already these two scenarios. You see them here on the bottom. One is the simulation with more robots, and another one is the simulation with more humans. I have predefined some of the process costs for both the scenarios, the duration of the activities, and they can also be taken directly from process mining, the durations itself. I have defined the frequency of the execution of the gateways, so how many times it's going in a direction, how many times it's going in another, and the number of resources that are allocated. So in the scenario with the robots, I have 5 resources and 120 employees. In the scenario with the humans, I have 2 robots and 140 employees. And now what I simply can do is to set up the simulation scenario. So one day, I can play it. And what the system is going to do is that it's going to give me an overview of, let's say, in a token perspective, how is my process being executed with this kind of workforce that I have set up, if there are any points that I need to be worried about, so if there are any kind of bottlenecks that are being generated during the simulation, for example, and if I execute also the other scenario, so the one with the humans, now I get the comparison of the two scenarios, and it becomes very clear for me to understand that on one side, so on the side where I would include more robots, my costs would be slightly higher, maybe due to the licensing cost or the IT implementation cost, while my cycle time would be definitely higher on the scenario with the humans. And now what becomes important is really to understand what is the priority for the organization. If you want to improve your customer experience, then timing is going to be of the essence. A loan, or would say for a customer, what is important is to receive the loan in the lowest possible time. But if your objective is in the excellence of your process, then potentially it's going to be the cost of the real factor that is going to be the deciding factor for this specific scenario. And if you are not convinced by this, what Signavio provides is also a detailed drill down into the simulation of both the scenarios in Excel, so very easy to use and very easy to explore. And it goes really into the details of all the costs. I can make it a bit bigger. Exactly. And it goes really in the detail of all the cost by individual step, per individual simulated process, in the detail of the cycle times, of the resource consumption, bottlenecks, and so on and so forth. So it really becomes a perfect basis to take a conscious decision and really decide which one is the strategy that we want to apply for our organization at that specific point in time. And now let's assume that we have decided to take the decision to proceed with the robots. And now what happens is I'm going to inform my IT department that I want to deploy a couple of robots. And in this case, we have decided to apply 3 extra robots. And after some adjustment time, what is going to happen is that I will need to start evaluating the performance of these robots and to evaluate the impact of this RPA implementation on my process. And to do this, I'm going to leverage again the process mining technology. And I could start, as I did before, by having a check to the process performance. If you remember the numbers that we have seen before, in this case, we see a slight increase in the overall cycle time from 21 to 24 days. And also, it's clear that after an initial testing period, the overall cycle time has been increasing on a week-by-week basis. So probably something didn't work as well as we thought at the beginning or as we planned at the beginning. And we could go again deep in the analysis. Now we see that the workforce is much more segmented than we had before. So before it was only humans, now it's humans and robots in a much more shared approach. But what becomes really interesting is to go inside the analysis of the robotic performance itself and to see what kind of impact it had on our human-based processes or on those processes that are executed primarily by humans. And this specific chart here is extremely interesting for me because if you follow the lines, the green and the blue line, you see that the green line was slightly lower than the blue line. So this means that the times that the processes were executed by the humans were slightly slower than the times that were executed by the robots. But if you look carefully, they actually start crossing and getting near to each other. And what does this mean? This is kind of a learning curve because even humans take time to get used to the application of robotics in a process. It's not something that happens in a day. It's something that takes weeks to really fully leverage all the insights and all the things that the robots are doing in the process. And we even see now a deflection of the blue line, so we really see that the humans are starting to be even better than when robots are operating, thanks to the leveraging and the understanding of everything that the robots are doing for them. And this is the basis for the collaboration within them. Naturally, we could even go further into the analysis of each individual robot to see how many cases are executed on a weekly basis, how many events they are executing. And for example, in this case, you remember before that we have seen that our cycle time didn't improve as we expected, but it was actually getting worse. And we can go in the individual performance of each robot, and we can see that, for example, one of the robots has not been performing as well as we wanted to. In this case, this robot number 3 is performing, let's say, very worse, much worse than all the others, 41 days on average compared to 25. And this can be due to multiple reasons. It can be that we didn't implement it properly. It can be that we didn't set up the business rules in the correct way. Maybe we simply chose the wrong vendor. It can happen. What is important now is that we take the right decision on how to treat this underperforming robot, exactly like we would do with an underperforming employee. And here, it opens up to multiple scenarios. We have, oh, that didn't work as well as I wanted to, but I have it open already. Oh, no, not even here. Well, there was actually, for some reason, it indented like this. So the possibilities that are opening up right now are on one side that we can fire the robot, or the other side we can support the robot. So firing the robot has also multiple implications. It can be replacing it with a new one. It can be upgrading it with the most updated version from the same vendor. It can be calling a new vendor. It can be replacing it with a new one, or even leaving an empty spot. It depends. It always depends on what kind of process you have, what kind of activity you're looking at, and what kind of job this specific robot was executing for us. While instead, if we move to the supporting side, it's, let's say, fairly easier because we can decide either to introduce an extra human to support the activity of this robot and maybe the decision-making of this robot, or maybe to support it with even an extra robot. Now, for the sake of the demo, I have decided to fire the robot, and I have decided to absolutely do nothing else, or no substitution. But in order to streamline this management process, we have leveraged a workflow automation tool. And we have created a very simple workflow that at the beginning takes the reporting of the underperforming robot, informs IT about this underperforming robot, and then requires a change on the process model in order to finalize the adjustment. So in this case, I can just simply start by reporting robot number 3. Oops. I have a task that gets assigned to me. I need to say who is reporting the issue, in this case me. I have pre-selected all these fields. Robot number 3, I want to include also the link to the analysis, so in case my IT department wants to have a look, they can do it quickly. Perfect. Now, I take the IT hat for a second. I have received an email. I get informed that I have to remove this specific robot. And when now I come back to the modeling hat, I can go back to the modeling environment. There I go. And I can simply go and remove my robot from the process. Well, wrong command. And maybe also mark this activity as not fit anymore for our robotic automation, robotic implementation initiative. Perfect. It's taking a bit to save. I let it save. That's fine. Now, everything that I have done so far, it's something that in a real scaled RPA environment would happen very often and on a large scale of processes. So when we need to do this kind of controls, we cannot do them individually per process, but we need to have some kind of framework to support an ongoing monitoring. And in order to do this, at Signavio, we did something a bit different. We merged process modeling with process mining insights into what we call the lights on concept. That is the, let's say, juxtaposition of traffic light and indicators on top of process models to really keep track in a quick way of processing of any kind of indicator that is relevant for our process, or for example, to simply measure the performance or to simply keep track of maybe the performance of the robots on our process. I have actually preloaded it because I knew it would have been slow. Oops. No. Oh, yeah, exactly. So, for example, here I have this specific traffic light where I see all the 4 robots that are remaining in my system, and I have the performance of it. Or I could see, for example, the cycle time when it's going to load. There it is. So here I have, for example, the cycle time analysis. All those widgets that I have on process mining side can become the drivers for this kind of indicators. And this is a much easier way, a much faster way to keep track of all these factors of risks or KPIs on a single process perspective, but even on a value chain perspective. This can go from level 1 to level 5 without any kind of problem. So, to sum it up, what I showed you so far was an end-to-end scenario of application of robotics from the discovery to the final monitoring. And in order to do this, or at least my demonstration shows you that in order to do this, yesterday Jim was talking about triplets and combinations of trends. For us, it's even 4 trends together. It's RPA, it's process management, it's process mining, and it's also workflows, all together to have a complete 100%, or let's say 360-degree management of our RPA initiative. And what we also saw is that it's possible to actually keep track of the performance of these robots and take actions in case they are not working in the right way, or they are simply underperforming, or we simply implemented them in a wrong way. But even more important, we saw that it is possible to measure the impact that these robots are having on our human workforce, and there can be scenarios where humans and robots collaborate with each other. So the question is not anymore if this can happen, but the question is there a limit to this? Thank you. Questions? Yeah.
So I need some clarification. I was confused about one thing.
Yeah.
So you have the robot doing specific tasks, and specific robot doing specific tasks under a particular lane.
Mm-hmm.
But when you were showing your simulation data, you were talking about robot cycle time, which assumed the robot did the full process, and you were comparing that to human. So it seems like
Let's see.
there's a mismatch in my understanding.
Let's have a look. So here, this is the simulation scenario. So in the duration itself, I can define for each single activity the duration that is going to be done. Naturally I'm simulating, so it can be 1 second or 1 minute or 1 hour, depending if it's a human or a robot. When I execute them, it takes directly the right simulation, let's say, matrix, and applies it on top of the bpmN model, and tries to understand if there are going to be any kind of bottlenecks based on the resource consumption that I am planning to have.
Yeah, okay, so let me ask my question differently.
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean by cycle time?
End to end.
Then there's a mismatch in what you were showing us.
Okay. So if I run my executions and, oops, that's not the right one. Like this is going to show all the tokens.
It wasn't the analytics. You were showing us the cycle time of each robot compared to the cycle time.
Oh, that's a distribution. Oh, now I understand. Okay. So you mean this one?
This one or the other one that you were comparing to humans.
Yeah, the graph that compares the human and the system, can you define the 2 lines better?
This one.
Scenario, yes.
Ah, okay.
Scenario,
Got it.
So this is
parts of the same process model.
This is on a week-by-week basis. This is post-deployment.
yeah, but the cycle time is the full process.
Is the full process.
But the robots are involved only in one task.
Not always. in the process itself, oops, I've said it at the beginning, but I was actually very fast on that, so I apologize for that.
I guess I'm asking,
No.
where did the robot come in?
Yep. You see that there are some specific activities where the automatic application is possible. Yes, then if yes, it goes directly to the robot, but if not, it stays on the employee side. So what I'm saying, and that's exactly the overall idea of the demo, was not to show that the humans are replaced by robots, but they collaborate together. In some specific cases, the decision is going to be taken directly by a robot because it's simple enough based on the business rules. In some other cases, it will need to go to a human. What I'm comparing there is when a robot is involved or when a human is involved in the process. So it checks that.
Right. So
No
I
problem.
guess then is what you did is you altered the probability distribution for the two different scenarios.
Yeah.
One scenario had everything split, right? Another scenario had basically the bottom lane turned off, in effect. So something like that, I mean, that would be a way.
In the scenario itself, it was actually 2 and 5. So it was, on one side, I was just increasing by 3 the number of robots. On the other side, I was increasing by 20 the number of humans. So, but there was still a bit of.
But generally speaking, did you have different handle times, duration times, whatever, for robot versus human, or was it the same number for each?
They were a bit different. I mean, I also tried to, I had to insert manually every single robot.
I understand.
So I tried to also make it, let's say, aligned for most of the robots and then try to find one robot that was misbehaving. But yeah. Perfect. Good.
Daniel?
I think this.
That worked